My name is Elliott Hager. I'm a senior at West Liberty-Salem High School, located in Champaign County. The title of my project is the real-world application of the software development lifecycle. So, before really diving into things, I wanted to explain what the SDLC, also known as the software development lifecycle, really is. It is a cycle in which a lot of developers, big and small, from companies like Google, Microsoft, or just independent people like me, follow when they go to build an application from start to finish. So there are 5 main stages of this cycle. They are as follows: analysis, also known as requirement analysis, design, implementation, testing, and evaluation. So while the theory is great, I needed something in practice to apply it to, some type of project. So I had been a part of the West Liberty-Salem band program since 5th grade and really enjoyed it. I got to know the band director really well, Mr. Stephen Fannin. Over those years, I had navigated the music library. The way that it's navigated is you have a catalog that's a printout of an Excel spreadsheet about 15 pages long, and you look up the music library number, and then you go through the filing cabinets looking through these big yellow packets that have the numbers written on them. Usually they're about 5-digit numbers each. So looking through that, kind of a pain in the butt when you're looking for more than one piece. So one day I thought, well, why not go and make a web application? It's kind of like a search engine. So pitched my idea to the band director. He really was enthusiastic about it and immediately gave me the green light to go ahead and start developing it, that he was interested. He'd also let me in on that he'd been looking for something like this for about 9 years. The issue was he found things that he liked, just that licensing fees or subscription model fees were very expensive and hard to maintain, especially with the little funds that the band boosters had that they could offer for this. I went and offered to do it for free, as I would be able to get experience, and they would be able to get something out of it, and kind of just help repay back to the band program for the enjoyment that I've had. So, the web application is built with HTML5, CSS3, PHP 8, and the CodeIgniter 4 framework. The CodeIgniter 4 framework is a PHP 8 framework that was actually written in PHP itself. So the user, through this application, can perform CRUD actions. Those are create, read, update, and delete. They can do that through the front end to be able to create, read, update, and delete pieces in the database. So I had taken 3 Franklin classes on these subjects, from database management to basic web page construction with HTML5 and CSS3 to server-side programming for web applications with PHP 8. So, analysis, also known as requirement analysis, is when the developer and the client both sit down and have a discussion. They discuss what features they want in the application, what purpose or purposes will this application serve. Is there anything third-party or any other applications they want it to integrate nicely and play nicely with? Say that they have already an existing system. And who will kind of see this application? Will it be open to the public? So if so, then the UI, the graphical user interface, will need to be really polished and look really nice. If not, and if it's going to be used internally, the user interface might not need to look as polished and just kind of be just so that it can get by and be used with ease. During this, also, the documentation for testing is worked out. Corner cases are identified. Those are just weird scenarios that might come up every once in 10,000 uses. Also, stress testing methodologies are used to make sure that the application won't break under load. So figures A, B, C, and D on the following slides represent this part of the process when I was making this application. Okay, figures A and B. These are kind of crucial to understand what's going on with the application before I continue. So figure A is the MVC pattern. I learned about this in one of my Franklin classes. The MVC pattern is something that a lot of web developers use when they develop web applications. MVC stands for Model View Controller. So the process works kind of like this. The client or their browser sends a request over the web page, and it sends something over to the controller. The controller does what its name is. It controls the entire process on the server side before sending data back to the client. The controller receives the requests, sends a request for data to the model if there's anything needed from the database. The model handles talking to and sending data to the database and retrieving that as well. So It talks with the database, grabs what it needs, sends it back to the controller. The controller now has all that data. That then is sent to generate a view. A view is what the client actually sees and what the user sees and interacts with. That generated view is sent back to the controller, and that view then from the controller is sent back over to the browser for the client to interact with. This makes it a dynamic web page, where the data can change each time the user reloads the page. The next key part of this is a CSS grid. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it styles all of the little HTML elements, from color to font to positioning to how much padding or how much space around it there is in relation to everything else. So CSS grids are similar to math XY coordinate grids. They can be thought of like that. You have horizontal grid lines and vertical grid lines, and then you have columns and rows. This kind of helps position things in kind of like a building block type of manner, or like Legos. This is kind of easy for me to visualize in my head, and it's something that I choose to go with for a lot of websites that I've made. Okay, figure C shows the CodeIgniter 4 documentation that I had referenced a lot during this to make sure that I was doing things right. Figure D is something that I learned how to do in a web development class that I took at Franklin, kind of one of the earlier ones I took. It's called a wire diagram. A wire diagram lays out all of the pages and all of the links or actions that can be taken on a web page, and any files that are linked to, or any external pages that are linked to. So we got the home page here that starts out, and everything branches off from there. All the little boxes here, with the exception to the cloud, describe all of the internal functions or links and where they go to, what purpose they serve. The arrows here all represent actions that can be taken, or links. The cloud represents an external page, which leads to my GitHub page for the software that was written, as it's open source. The next stage is design. This is where the information from the client and everything that was written down in the analysis is used to go ahead and start designing things. So mock-ups and wireframes of each individual page are made. Also, the technology stack is determined at this time. Technology stack is what languages, or what several languages are used to go ahead and make this up. So for me, I've got a front end of HTML5 and CSS3. I've got middleware, or the kind of application part. What's running on the server is PHP 8, and then on the back is the database, which is the MySQL server running the MySQL database. Figures E, F, and G all represent this part of the process for this application. Figure E is a mock-up made in Adobe Photoshop CS2 of the home page. The one that is shown on screen right now is what the band director chose. There was another version that was made that did not have the treble clef. Figure F is an initial page, as I only learned CodeIgniter 4 just for this project. I had never used a framework like that before in any of my academics. So this is a kind of test page just to get used to it and to figure out how everything works before I went to go make an actual page for it. This was made on December 17th of 2021. Next is Figure G. Within the span of 2 days, so December 19th is when this was made. The final design for the home page and the subsequent pages was determined and made. While things like links or how many things you can search by or headings might have changed, the general layout was just about all the same. This leads to the third step. This is implementation. This is where the design and analysis, all that paperwork, is all turned into actual hard code that can actually be used by the client. Figures H, I, J, K, and L all represent graphics of this process. Figures H and I are talking about CSS grids. So the final CSS grid here in figure H represents what Mozilla Firefox actually laid out on top of the page. Figure I is the actual CSS written. You got rows and then you got columns. The dots are all spaces, so that makes that little space and separation to kind of bring focus just to the search box. FRs here are fractional units. That's what FR stands for, fractional. Each of these, one represents the entire width of the page, and anything below that represents a fraction of the page. Figure J is the configuration file for the database. The database and the web server can't just talk with each other. You got to make sure you configure them so then they send requests to each other and receive data to and from each other. Figures K and L. Figure K represents the nice user front end for the add page, and figure L represents the model code. This is what talks to the database. While I used CodeIgniter 4's built-in query builder, this does not take away from the skill that's required or the knowledge. The query builder just builds the raw SQL statements. You still have to know to do an SQL insert and what each part of each of the pieces, the title, the arranger, the composer, what column those all represent, and what table you're going to put it in. Okay, stage 4. This is testing. This is once everything's developed, it's handed off to the quality assurance team or person, and the developer basically tells them, do with it what you wish, break it as much as you can. I want to get this back destroyed with a bunch of notes. What they mean by this is not physically destroying something, but they physically mean to go ahead and take the application and test the heck out of it. They mean putting in erroneous data like zeros, or putting in invalid data, or trying to get access to permissions that only users of a higher tier, maybe a paid tier, would have access to with a free account. Figures M and N represent graphics of this process. M and N both show the SQL queries that were executed that were made by the query builder. So here an SQL insert was done on the add page. And here in figure N, a select was done to rep all of the data to go ahead and display all the marching band pieces. Everything was originally in little gray boxes, but now it's put into a table. So this leads to the evaluation. The evaluation is also known as deployment. If the client will see this application, or the application that's developed, maybe for the first time, maybe not, depending on how things are executed with the company. If the application meets all the client's expectations and they're happy with it, hands are shaken, paperwork signed, and a date is scheduled for the application to be deployed onto a server live for use. If not, the client mentions everything that they would like changed, and the person talking with the client, either the team lead or somebody from the development team, takes notes, goes back, and starts working on it right away. I have no graphics of this process, but a conversation with the band director was held, a demonstration was shown, and he was very, very pleased with this. The application now currently runs on a 2012 Mac Mini running Windows 10 using the Boot Camp Assistant, as Mac OS was kind of a pain in the butt to get everything running. An XAMPP serving stack was used to serve the application to the band director and to any students that had the IP address of the computer. So, XAMPP serving stack, cross-platform, Apache, MySQL, Perl, and PHP was used to serve it. Visual Studio 2019 Community Edition was the IDE of choice. CodeIgniter 4 framework was a PHP framework and MVC framework used. PHP 8 was a server-side language. CSS 3 was used to style the HTML. HTML5 was actually to build the pages. PHPMyAdmin is the database graphical user interface used to manage the database. Figures O, P, Q, and R all represent this. So figure O and figure P all represent screenshots of the XAMPP control panel in Visual Studio 2019. Figure Q represents PHPMyAdmin, and figure R represents Dependabot. Dependabot is a bot on GitHub that alerts me or sends pull requests and emails to let me know, hey, a new version of what you depend on for your project to work is there. So PHP unit for unit testing, or the CodeIgniter framework itself, if there's any updates, it will alert me to go ahead and review those changes and implement them. Okay, plans. I have some big plans for this. Districts, judges there for District 1 at Edison State and Ben Logan High School high school judges both loved that I made this to give back to the band program, as I enjoyed it so much. But they also wanted to see me get some compensation or some type of kickback for all the hard work I've done. They suggested I go get a patent for this and possibly sell it. So currently I'm looking into the patent process and looking to getting a more advanced copyright to help restrict against commercial use without my permission, while allowing people that will use it for just personal use or individual use to go ahead and feel free to download it, look at the code, and modify it to their heart's content. I got some sad news earlier this year that the band director, Mr. Fannin, has taken a job at Marysville. And due to this, I'm going to still finish everything for West Liberty, but also possibly send it over to Marysville as well, depending on what the other band directors there say, and I'll keep communication with him. I'm also looking at hopefully implementing this at Ben Logan. I still want to implement stuff like CSS packages and all of that and polish some things up. Thank you for viewing this video, and thank you for the time for viewing my project. And here are my references.